Hey everybody, this is TCG Productions here. In today's video, we are going to be tearing down a Seagate ST1000DM003 hard drive. Yes, today is January 27, 2026. We are 27 days into the new year, and we already have our first failed hard drive of the year. That's almost something of a record. I have another hard drive sitting on the shelf behind me. That is a Samsung hard drive that is marked as being the first failed drive of 2023. In fact, this is the first failed drive of 2023. Not only is it the first failed drive of 2023, it failed 2 days into the year. 2 days, not even 2 entire days. And then we have a failed 2 terabyte WD black hard drive. So you know what? Today, I think, is going to be a special edition triple teardown. So, how about that? I initially planned on tearing out just one hard drive, but our latest digression has now made it a special edition triple teardown. So, how about we get the ball rolling on this show? So, again, first drive, ST1000DM003, single platter, real thin hard drive. Failed during erasure. This is a hard drive out of the dumpster dived computer that I had wiping in the previous video. This drive failed erasure, and D-Band marked it as, D-Band said erasure failed. So this drive is on the chopping block. I didn't even get a hard drive out of that pile of pre-manufactured grief. So, but basically what happened is, D-Band just failed the erasure, and whenever I checked the smart stats on it, it had 8 or 9 uncorrectable sectors, and it had 8 current pending sectors, which are sectors that are unreadable and cannot be read by the drive, and the data on them is gone. Now, if a current pending sector once it becomes readable once again, the contents of that sector will be reallocated to a spare sector on the drive, and the reallocation event count and the reallocated sectors count will go up. So, but whenever you see a non-zero current pending sector count on a hard disk, replace the disk immediately, because that drive is absolutely without a doubt failing. And then the next drive we have coming up is a Samsung SP2504C. This drive failed on me in the middle of software upgrades on my Dell Dimension E310 computer. And this drive did so quite excitingly. I was in the middle of upgrading the copy of Debian installed on that computer when all of a sudden the upgrade just bombed out right in the middle of things, and the system would not boot, and the hard drive had a pile of errors. So January 2nd, 2023, that drive died. That is the current record holder for earliest hard disk failure into a calendar year. And then we have what is probably one of the latest hard disk failures into a calendar year. We have a recertified, reconditioned 2 terabyte Western Digital black hard drive. This thing was baked to death in a computer case with absolutely awful airflow. This drive there is a story behind this drive, and that is something that we will get into later. So anyways, those are our 3 contenders on tonight's triple teardown. So anyways, let's go ahead and let's get the ball rolling on this first hard drive here. So this is our Seagate ST1000DM003, and these drives, these were failure-prone drives, and they continue to be failure-prone drives. The ST1000, 2000, I think the 3000 drives are all massively failure-prone. And I think one of the YouTube channels I used to follow quite closely many years ago, a YouTube channel by the name of Cube Computer Company, had several of these drives fail. And it ended up I think it ended up totaling out the RAID array in his primary workstation at the time, which, if I remember correctly, was called the Mid-Tower Deluxe, or MTDX for short. So these are failure-prone drives. These are not good drives. They're not reliable drives, and I have condemned and destroyed more of these drives than I could shake a screwdriver at. So I had a string of these things. I had a string of these things coming through. I had a string of these things landing up dead on the workbench, and they have slowed to a very, very slow trickle at this point. It's very rare that I get one of these drives on the workbench that's failing, because it's very rare that I get one of these drives on the workbench at all, because these things are absolute garbage. So we've got 6 Torx T8 screws. Well, they're kind of T8, they're kind of T9. A T9 will fit if you cram them. A T9 will fit if you cram the driver, driver into the screw, but a T8 fits much better, but is a little loose. So, why, dear telephone, are you making noise tonight? So, okay, campus is closed tomorrow. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Day 3 of closures continues unabated and possibly even abetted by our winter weather, because the roads have been awful lately, and they did not get better. They did not get better today. I mean, they've gotten better, but they're still sketchy. If it's not a major highway, it's sketchy at best and extremely dangerous at worst. So it does not surprise me that the college campus is closed tomorrow. So anyways, we have 1 or 2 hidden screws somewhere on this drive. Normally there's one under the label right around here, directly over the top of the platter stack. But that's normally something you find on multi-platter drives or older hard drives. This one, let me see. This one does not appear to have it, but this 2 terabyte WD Black definitely has it, because that is probably a 4-platter drive, going by the looks of things. But this drive here, being that it is a single platter drive, does not have such an arrangement. So there is a Torx screw hidden under the label right around here. There it is. And what that does is it anchors the head stack. There we go. It's like a chest burster from Alien. Either that or a zip that needs popped really badly. Anyways, you know what? There is a computer case under here that has a hard drive on top of it that I've been bashing my knee against ever since I hit record on this video. And so I'm going to take the liberty of temporarily curing that problem. Anyways, now that that is out of the way, yeah, this secures the head stack from the top side of the drive, because normally the head stack will ride on some kind of a bearing on the bottom of the drive. Okay, so that screw is completely backed off and is ready to come out. So I'll go ahead, swap over to my little flathead bit here, and some gentle prying on the cover right here. And the cover comes loose. Now, it goes without saying that if you actually care about your hard drive, that you absolutely do not open it for any reason unless A, you know exactly what you're doing, and B, you're doing so in a clean room environment. So, go ahead, pop the seal, and there we go. We have our shiny little metal cover here. So, yeah, we have a dab of we have a line of adhesive sealant that runs all the way around the edge, and then we have another line of sealant there that went on top of the magnets. And these are neodymium magnets, and I can't tell Yeah, I can't tell if this is just from opening the drive up the few seconds that it's been open and the seal popping loose, or if this is dust that had actually found its way inside the drive. But I am willing to bet that that's dust that is probably that probably got shaken loose and ended up in the drive by popping the cover off. So these platters also make really good mirrors, and so I can see the front of the camera quite clearly. And and now I'm looking at myself. So yeah, if I angle it like this and look at the platter, it looks like I'm looking at the camera. Hello. So, anyways, but yeah, this is a single platter hard drive. And then here we have the little dust filter, and we can see there's a little air channel in the case. There's a little air channel in the case of the drive right here that takes air that's coming off the platters, or in this case the platter as it's rotating, rams it through this filter, and then it gets recirculated back into the drive. So this just helps. This is intended to filter out any airborne contaminants that might find their way in. These hard drives are not hermetically sealed, believe it or not. These hard drives usually have vent holes on them. Usually, this one appears to be a hermetically sealed drive because there are no breather holes or anything like that. The Samsung drive does not contain any breather holes. However, this WD Black 2 terabyte drive it contains a breather hole right there that is partially obscured by the label. So, but yeah, the platter is reflective. We have we've got our two-head stack right there. You can see what looks like some machining lines. And you can see what looks like some machining lines. And then it's kind of hard to tell, but the top of that head stack there, that's a hex head nut. That's a hex head pattern that is integrated into the bearing that the head stack rides upon. And then we have our neodymium magnets there. And then just barely visible in there is the voice coil for the head stack. So I think the first thing we'll do here, besides switching back to my Torx bit, is, let's see, magnet. Yeah, the magnet stack has to come out first because the magnet stack contains an integral, not a lock, it's not an integral lock, but it contains an integral component that stops the head stack from sliding too far back and off of this little landing ramp right here, because if that happens, the heads will come together, and then you need to use a special tool to safely separate the heads so that way you can land the head stack back onto the landing ramp. So let me see, a T7's too big. Let's go for a T6. Okay, the T6 does the trick, and it goes without saying that if you have a pacemaker or any embedded device that is affected by magnets, do not work on hard disk drives, especially very big ones like such as the Seagate ST41650N hard drive that I tore down in one of my videos several years ago, because those head stacks are very big and they can get very dangerous. But those platter stacks are very big and they can get very dangerous. They can get very dangerous in general because they have very big, very strong magnets with a lot of pull to them, and if it happens to slip out of your hand and they come together and your finger happens to be in the way, you're not going to have a finger anymore. Your finger will become a pile of minced meat and an ER visit. So But these very small magnet stacks like this, with just a tiny little magnet on it, you can usually pry these apart by hand. So, but now that that magnet is off, you can see that the head stack has actually slid backwards and off of the landing ramp here, and now it is completely off the landing ramp. If we wanted to reuse these, which I certainly wouldn't in a professional data recovery environment, because at this point the drive's been majorly mishandled, because it's been open in a non-clean room environment. It's been contaminated with dust, and now the heads have basically crashed together. But if we wanted to reuse this head stack, we would need to insert a special tool to separate the heads and then keep them separated. There are special carrier tools that have been manufactured specifically for this purpose. So, with that out of the way, we have a couple of options here. We can either leave the head stack in place and then disassemble the single platter stack, or we can remove the head stack now. So I think I'm going to remove the head stack now, starting with this interface connector here, which is screwed down into the drive's frame. So there's one screw and there's two screws here. This second one wasn't even tight. Talk about a manufacturing oversight. This screw here, this screw was not tight. And no one has ever been in this drive since it was manufactured until now, which means that screw was never tightened down properly at the factory. So this here interfaces the head stack to the drive's logic board. And there is sealant on this connector interface, and it looks like in this case it is a little rubber gasket that goes around the interface here, and that is sandwiched between the Mylar and the drive's frame. So that is how that maintains as close to an airtight seal as it can manage. Now, in higher end hard drives that might be filled with helium or argon, depending on just how exotic the hard drive manufacturer wanted to get, there could be sealant around there. I have seen these drives where the manufacturer has put additional sealant compound around this head stack interface connector. So, but that connects to a set of pads on the drive's logic board that then connect to the drive's electronics, probably the head preamplifier electronics and everything like that. Just depends on what's located where. So now I have a hex head bit on my screwdriver, and this interfaces with the hex head screw integrated into the head stack, and this screws into a threaded boss on the hard drive's circuit board. And this is usually threaded down very tightly. But once this is backed off, which again may require some special cajoling, but once that's backed off, the head stack should come out, and in some cases it does not go into a threaded boss in the frame of the drive. It appears that this one goes into a screw on the other side of the hard drive, so that will just kind of have to hang out there like that. So now if we swap back over, there are 3 screws that hold this top, not exactly sure what this is called. I'd appreciate it if you could enlighten me in the comments section as to what this thing is called here. But this is basically a retention disc that applies that gets screwed down with these 3 screws which then applies compressive force to the platter stack, regardless if it's a 1 platter or a 9 or 10 platter stack, to keep all the platters sandwiched in place. So the third screw comes out, and so does this. So there's the underside of it. It looks like this could be used in a variety of hard drives. And they even have a slot here for a Woodruff key, probably for use on very large multi-platter hard drives, such as those used in enterprise applications. And then we have a landing ramp that needs to be removed in order to allow the platter stack, in order to allow the single hard disk platter to come out. And then our hard drive platter should come right out just like that. So here we have our very shiny platter here. It's reflecting quite well. You can use this as a mirror. And we can see there is a little, it looks like there is a little notch. It looks like there's a little marker etched into the bottom of the drive platter. It is barely visible on camera. You can kind of see it there. But what that is, but I'm not sure exactly what that is unless it is some kind of a, unless it's some kind of a locating notch or some kind of a locating mark to identify a specific position on the platters, or if it's just supposed to be some kind of a locating mark, or if it's just some kind of a locating mark for indicating placement of the separator ring, if there was going to be one present in the drive, or what that might be. If you work in the hard disk industry and you know what this is, I'd appreciate your insight in the comments. But this is a mirror finish platter. And a mirror finish is good here because this indicates that the platter has not suffered a head crash or other mechanical damage. If you recall the previous teardown I did on a failed hard drive, you'll notice that the platters all had a very brushed finish to them. And that drive had suffered a catastrophic head crash. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to temporarily seat that back in place. Then turn the drive upside down and take the logic board off the drive. Now the logic board on these drives, these logic boards, for the most part, unless you happen to get extraordinarily lucky, do not interchange between drives. They don't interchange between different make and model drives, obviously. They also do not interchange between identical make and model drives. So, take the thing off here. And the reason being, there is a little, so check this out. There is a very small 8-pin DIP IC here, and DIP stands for dual inline pin. And what this IC does, is it stores what is known as stage 1 calibration data. So 25S81, 01LJBA. That is that's the IC that stores the stage 1 calibration information. Now, when the drive's firmware, whenever you first power up the hard drive, or power up a hard drive, when you apply power, the first thing the firmware does is it will start up the spindle motor, and this is our motor driver IC. It will start the spindle motor up, and then it will initialize what's known as its stage 1 firmware. And the stage 1 firmware is located on an EEPROM, whether it be integrated into this controller IC here, or whether it be integrated into some other IC on the board. Either way, the stage 1 firmware will start up, spin up the spindle motor, and then it will load the stage 1 calibration data from this little 8-pin IC down here. And this little 8-pin IC contains the stage 1 calibration data, and what that does is it allows the drive firmware to access what is known as the service area on the drive. And the service area is located on the platter, and is located in a specially formatted section of the hard disk's platter, or platters if you have a multi-platter drive, that is formatted with low density formatted, and it contains the drive's smart records, error logs, and it also contains the stage 2 firmware for the drive, as well as the stage 2 calibration data. The stage 2 firmware contains all the drive specific aspects: model number, serial number, manufacturing date, everything like that. Everything the drive needs to absolutely identify itself as that unique drive to the system. And the stage 2 calibration data is what allows a firmware to initialize and access the high density formatted portion of the drive, the user accessible portion of the drive. If you have a stage 1 firmware failure, you cannot access the service area. And in some cases, the drive will never identify to the computer. If you have a stage 2 firmware failure, the drive will not be able to initialize or access the high density formatted region of the drive, and the drive may not properly identify itself to the computer, though it may make an attempt to identify itself, usually as the model code name. And in the case of this particular drive, the model code name would almost appear to be going by what looks to be an internal code name on this motor driver IC. Dylan appears to be the code name here. So, but now that the logic board is off the drive, there is a little pad right under here that almost certainly contains a single screw underneath it. And that is going to be a torque screw. So, go ahead, change screwdriver bits. Yeah, there is a Torx T8 or T9 screw under there, and the other side of it goes into this hex-headed screw. So I'm just going to place my finger down over the top of this, back that screw out, and now the head stack has come unseated. It has become unscrewed and is now free to roam about wherever it may. And so at this point, the head stack can be taken loose from the drive. So now we have now it looks like we have a set of probably test points. What looks to be test points there. 2 sets of them. And then just inside that, barely visible under the flex ribbon, we have what is probably, in all likelihood, the head preamplifier and RF electronics. So that is very tiny, and there is, as far as I can tell, there are no markings on the die. It is just a bare die, and the camera is having an extreme amount of trouble attempting to focus on that. But if you look at the way the traces are routed, how there's no sharp bends, it's all nice and smooth and curved. There's a lot of RF involved with hard drive with the low-level hard drive magnetic electronics like this. And then below that, we have the lower magnet. And this is a pretty typical setup here. This thing's held in with 3 screws. And it should come free just like so. So there is the lower magnet. Now you want to take care to keep those 2 magnets separate if you do not intend for them to come together. Otherwise they will probably come together, and if anything that happens to be in the way when they do come together will be pretty quickly turned into a pile of mush. If it is capable of being turned into a pile of mush. And the magnets themselves could explode. You know, the magnets themselves could, if they are brought together with enough force, explode, sending shards of magnet everywhere. So it's a very bad thing to have neodymium magnets slammed together like that. So, but then we're just left with the bare drive. Well, just a bare drive chassis for the most part. We have a spindle motor that is pressed in. Yeah, we have a spindle motor that is pressed in with electrical contacts epoxied into the drive's frame. We have some marking. We have some stickers. That looks like a. I know that's not a QR code. And then up here, I think, is a data matrix code. And then we have production information here, telling us when the hard drive was manufactured. Looks to be February of 2014, if I had to guess. And then we have a serial number sticker back there. So, yeah, I'll get this drive put back together and then we'll move on to the next one. Okay, for round 2 on tonight's triple teardown, we have a Samsung SP2504C. This drive here, obviously pronounced dead on January 2nd, 2023. It's the first dead drive of 2023. And it just occurred to me that I should probably get the smart stats off this thing before I do anything else with it, because it may never come back up enough again to ever get the smart stats. We'll be right back. Okay, scratch that. Apparently this drive is so dead that it will not allow my test system that I connected it to pass post when the SATA cable to this thing is connected. So there will not be any smart stats from this drive. But I will assure you this thing was giving me the click of death and not identifying to the system. So, we're going to take an interesting route here, and that is to start by taking the logic board off the drive. But first, there is this little cover, this little plastic shield here that needs to be unclipped. A little plastic shield, probably to keep random metal bits from touching the drive and wreaking havoc. So this one does not appear to have a little 8-pin IC for the stage 1 firmware. So either this thing doesn't have discrete stage 1, stage 2, either this thing doesn't have a discrete stage 1, stage 2 split calibration data, or maybe the stage 1 firmware is integrated into the controller IC, or maybe the 8-pin IC that I'm looking for is simply on the other side of the drive circuit board. So, but we have a Marvell controller IC, we have a Samsung memory IC here. Looks like 64 megabytes if I had to guess. Then we have our motor driver IC. Doesn't have any obvious branding on it, but that does say 6L0 or 0N36E. Says made in Malaysia. And then the silk screening on the drive circuit board has a code name of Poseidon on it. So that would be this drive's code name, Poseidon. So yeah, first thing we're going to do is take the logic board off the bottom of the drive. Looks like 4 screws hold it on. And just looking at the bottom of the case here, this drive has a spindle motor that can be unscrewed. That is not pressed in. If you'll notice, there's a little well here, a well here, and there's probably a well somewhere like right in here where screws thread into from the other side to secure the spindle motor into place. So 4 screws come out, and the logic board drops off the bottom of the drive. And yeah, there is no 8-pin IC. There is, however, a set of very tarnished contacts here that the head stack connects to. So but yeah, and then there's a little pad right under here, a little foam pad. That's just simply pressed down, probably for sound deadening if I had to guess. We have a warranty void if removed sticker here that is covering a slot. And that is covering a slot that probably goes directly to the drives. That probably goes directly into the HDA or head disk assembly. It's the sealed portion of the drive. And we have this says 12 and it's got a whole bunch of little divots punched into it. So 250 gig. Okay, this is dated February of 2007. Yeah, 2007-02. So these Samsung spin point drives were not very well regarded from what I remember. This one is definitely an example of why. So that down there, that's the little contact point for, that's the set of contact pins that connects the head stack to the rest of the drive. So the next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and take the cover off the drive. And let's see, any hidden screws? There's a hidden screw right under there. No other hidden screws. So there's a hidden screw right in this area. So we'll Go ahead and break that loose. Sometimes those screws are different. You know, sometimes those screws are different from the rest of them that are used on the drive's cover. So need to break out the screwdriver and do that. So we have a 2-platter drive with a 4-head. We have a 2-platter drive with a 4-head stack. I find it interesting how there's a little rubber washer up there that looks like it pressed down against the magnet, because it's right around there. And there's the there's the magnet. If we look carefully here, we can see maybe we can't see where it pressed down. And then the dust filter appears to be integrated into the lid of the drive as well. So, put on the screws with that. And since this drive is of the kind where everything sticks up from the base and the lid is molded around the internal components, that will make disassembly a little bit easier. And as we can see here, we have once again have a mirror finished platter on this side. The Mylar ribbon cable for the head stack connection is dated the 51st week of 2006. And let's check the dust filter. These dust filters are really good at catching any debris that occurs as a result of a head crash. But the filter appears to be clean. So, this drive, this is one of the drives that parks the heads on the inside of the platters, rather than having a dedicated landing ramp, which in my opinion is inferior to the landing ramp design. But we can see a lot here without ever having to disassemble this thing. There is our head preamplifier. Handles both read and write. Looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like there's 8 sets of tracks going to the heads. And speaking of heads, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So we probably have a read and a write coil on the ends of those heads. So, yeah. So the next thing we'll do is, looks like to get the drive apart, we need to take the upper magnet off, because the upper magnet has a little post in it that blocks the head stack from coming back far enough to come off of the platters. So those screws come out, and oh wow, that's unique. Apparently those 2 screws actually secure the entire magnet stack onto the drive, and it just rotates out like that. Of course, the 2 magnets are able to be separated, but I like this design. Makes it easy to get the drive apart. And now that the magnet stack is off, we should be able to move this back far enough such that the heads will clear the platter stack. If we had a special carrier tool, now would be the time to install it. However, we don't have such carrier tools, so now the head stack is clear of the platter stack, and there is no screw on the other side that helps retain the head stack into the drive. So to get the head stack out of the drive, we need to undo these two Torx screws that holds the interface connector for the head stack into the drive's case. And then there is, once again, another hex-headed nut that needs to be unscrewed. And let's see, it's not exactly an H3 size, but it's not exactly an H2.5 either. So we might have to get creative with this, such as by taking a T10 Torx bit or T15 Torx bit and ramming it down the, there we go, center here. And it looks like this is a screw that is partially threaded and partially not threaded, that is covered with, and the unthreaded portion is covered with a thin film of oil that forms a bearing that the head stack rides upon. So go ahead and take the head stack out of the drive, and we can see that we have a little rubber gasket that goes around, and then we have, let me see, is that the logo for amp? No, it's a Molex made this connector. G4001-2011. Yeah, G4001-2011. And here we can get a much better look at the head preamplifier IC. We have 4 capacitors, and we have the IC, and then we have some distinctly RF shaped traces. But there are no markings on that IC. And then we have the voice coil back here, which is encased, which is fixed in this plastic thing that appears to be custom molded onto the back of the head stack. And then let's see if we can pry one of these heads apart and get a look at it. I probably don't have the zoom on this camera nor the focusing power to get a good image on that. Camera would much rather focus on a totally separate and random part of the head stack. Here we go. There's the read and write head, and there are in fact 2 sets of wires going into it. So maybe this uses some sort of differential drive type signaling. I'm not real sure, and there the focus just ran off on me. So interesting things going on with this head stack. So this head stack screw right here screws into what looks to be a bushing that is machined into the case of the drive right there. And with these two fully assembled, it forms a bearing. It forms a bearing that the head stack rides upon. And these bearings have to be exceptionally durable because they are a non-serviceable part. They are a non-serviceable part, just like everything else inside the head disc assembly enclosure. So those screws there. And then we have 4 screws that hold on the retention ring for the platters. There is the retention ring. You can see there's a little lip on the outer edge. It also appears to have a domed design to it to further aid in generating a compressive force when this is screwed down and transferring it down to the remainder of the platter stack. So we have our first platter here. And once again we have a mirror finish, except for where I've touched it. So we have a mirror finish. We have a separator here, which appears to be made of aluminum. Probably to minimize the space between the platters and therefore minimize the air resistance as the platter stack is turning. And yes, this is very light, so it is almost certainly made of aluminum. It's not made of mirror finish aluminum or anything like that. It's just aluminum. You can see it looks like it's kind of roughly finished. So, but it is incredibly light. And we have a separator ring that goes between the platters. This is a combination of mirror finished and brushed aluminum. And then we have our second platter. And this is once again a mirror finish. So we do not have another head crash. And I can tell you the third hard drive we're going to tear down was also not the victim of a head crash. So, and then we just have our spindle motor. And this is secured down with 3 screws, maybe a bit of sealant. Nope, not even a bit of sealant, just comes right out of the drive. So, they didn't use any sealant back here to help get an airtight seal between the drive, this, and the outside air. So, 3-phase AC motor, That's what pretty much all of these things are. These are little miniature 3-phase AC motors. We have a little locating notch here. The interface is with a locating tab there on the drive. And it interfaces with a locating tab there on the drive. So that way you cannot accidentally put the motor in incorrectly. I guess they're just relying upon the natural seal from the aluminum to aluminum contact to keep air from getting in. So, yeah, interesting construction. So, we'll go ahead and get this put back together, and then we'll move on to the third drive. Okay, this is the third drive on tonight's Tuesday triple teardown. This here is a 2 terabyte WD Black WD 2003 FZEX. This hard drive here, this hard drive ran from 2019 until 2021 in my dad's computer. And the drive this replaced, this is a recertified drive. And this drive was an RMA replacement for another 2 terabyte WD Black hard drive that ran from 2017 until 2019 or thereabouts. And that hard drive, both this drive and the one before it, the one that got RMA'd, died because they were overheated for a very, very, very prolonged period of time. And what I have seen happen is the head preamplifier usually bites the dust, and then the drive just completely goes down a hill on skates. And you get a zillion current pending sectors, you get read errors out the wazoo, and the drive overall becomes incredibly, incredibly slow. And that's the point at which you should replace the drive and restore from your last known good backups. So going by the smart stats on this drive, which you should see on your screen right now, this drive was very, very sick. It had racked up what is one of the highest current pending sector counts that I have ever seen on a drive. It is one of the highest current pending sector counts that I've ever seen on a drive. 1,516. It had an offline uncorrectable value of 1,951 sectors. It had a million raw read errors. Not a million, literally. It had over 10,000. It has actually tripped out the respective pre-failure indicator. And the drive has only been powered on and off about 80 times. It's managed to reallocate 396 sectors. And it had just a tad shy of 17,600 power on hours. So, yeah, this drive, it ran for less than 2 years and fell over dead with a bad head preamplifier. So, but yeah, this drive has spun up for the last time, and we are going to tear it down, take it apart. So the first thing we're going to do is, just like last time, we're going to start by taking the logic board off the bottom of the drive. Now this uses some interesting screws that are more panhead than anything else. So it uses a very thin, very flat screw head. So if you're ever putting a logic board on one of these drives, be careful. Don't over torque these, because you'll bend the screw head, and you will not be in for a very fun time, I don't believe. So this uses a total of 7 screws to hold the logic board on the drive. That one wasn't even tight. That one was loosey-goosey from the factory. That one wasn't tight either. Again, this is a reconditioned drive, and it's been kicking around for over 4 years. There we go. Because this drive was taken out of service and pronounced, for all intents and purposes, dead on December 21st, 2021. So it's been kicking around for over 4 years. So this is the drive. Well, see, this is the drive's logic board. First thing to note is that looks like a ceramic fuse there, adjacent to one of the spindle motor connections. And then we have a Marvell controller IC and a Samsung memory chip. K415. I'll have to look that up, see what size that is. We have a Marvell memory chip, controller chip. We have a WinBond 8-pin IC. This is probably our stage 1 firmware or our stage 1 calibration data. We have our motor driver IC that runs our three-phase AC spindle motor. It's an ST Microelectronics. Let's see, that is a WDHC8TD. And a lot of those traces go straight up through some resistors and to our spindle motor connection. We have another little 8-pin IC here. 6-pin actually. 5-pin, those are probably power transistors. We have an interesting little QFP package here. MPOH or MPDH 8736 422. Two more, looks like ceramic fuses, some more power electronics, voltage regulator. So yeah, this little 8-pin IC right here is probably our stage 1 calibration data. We have nothing on the back here except for a little, probably, data matrix code. And let's see, do we have some kind of a silk screening date? You know, I don't see any kind of a date silk screened into the board here to determine when this thing was originally manufactured. So, and we have some very orangish yellowish foam on the back here. I have no idea whether or not this started out life this way, but it's clearly found itself in this condition. So I'll just go ahead and peel that off. Curiously enough, it's got some, almost looks like tape or something. And we have a screw here, probably for the bottom of the head stack. We have an aluminum sticker here covering a hole directly into the HDA. We have some more epoxy, and we have a little mylar ribbon cable connecting our spindle motor, and then our head stack connector is right here. So yeah, well, so yeah, there's a screw right here that we'll get to, and then we have a top cover here. We have a surprising amount of screws for this top cover. We have one, 2, 3 exposed here. These labels are covering 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We have a 9th under here on top of the head stack, and we have a 10th right here on top of the bladder stack. So there's 10 screws keeping the lid on this drive. So, head, grab the right size Torx bit, and we'll go ahead and take the 3 screws off of this drive that are readily exposed. I think this is the first time I've ever been in one of these Western Digital black hard drives. I think I've been in a green a few times. With these WD black drives, I've always been curious as to their construction. Here we go, that sticker just peeled up and off. Another sticker right there. Another one there. Another one there. And the one for the head stack is going to be right in here. And that is looking like it's going to be a different size. Cannot tell if it's going to be bigger or smaller. Looks like it's going to be smaller than the rest of the screws. That or I've just misaimed and hit the wrong thing. That's all 10 screws. And so let's see if I can just peel the cover off with my bare hand. Does not look like that's going to be a viable thing. So just like the previous two, we'll change bits and pry our way into the drive. Western Digital seems to have used some very high quality sealant on the head disk assembly enclosure side of things, because it's not giving up its secrets very readily. There we go. Now we're starting to pop free. There we go. Tell you what, this has been the best of the 3 enclosure seals that I have seen. I'm really having to put in some work to get this thing open. And just got a little dowel holding us up. Oh, I see. There's another screw right in there that I completely missed. There we go. Let's see. Have I missed any other screws? Does not appear that I have. So it's just a matter of taking what we've got. There we go. Wow, this is, oh wow. Holy smokes. On several counts. 1, the sealant. 2, the fact that we have what appears to be a 1, 2, 3, 4, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like we have a, wow. If I'm reading this right, we have a 6-platter stack drive on our hands here. So we have a 6-platter high stack. No wonder why these 2 terabyte WD black drives are so heavy, and unless you bake the things to death, pretty freaking reliable. Because Western Digital has taken older technology platters that are tried and true and just stacked more of them together in the same drive. This sealant material is very, very strong. This is very strong material. This stuff reminds me of like valve cover gaskets. So where do we begin? I think we'll begin with the dust filter. Now, it might look like it's contaminated with dust from a head crash, but it's not. That's actually the filtration media inside it. And look, and we'll get a better view at the platter stack this thing's packing shortly. But I think the first thing I want to do is, well, give this platter stack a good fling. So, but yeah, this is why these Western Digital drives are something else in terms of heft, in terms of how heavy they are, and how reliable they are whenever you treat them properly. But it also goes to show why you should not abuse these drives too terribly much. So it looks like undoing the top cover freed up the top half of this magnet. And so I think what I'll do, yep, that it did. And this is where it gets a little bit sketchy working with these hard drives, because that magnet there is very powerful. And it also means that it will very definitely ruin your day if you get on the bad side of it. So I've got some old pliers here. Grab a hold of it with them and pull it apart. So as we can see here, this is a very beefy magnet. It's also very strong. So you should keep this far, far, far away from its counterpart magnet. Because with how strong these magnets are, if they get together and you happen to have a finger or a thumb or a limb caught in the way, you're not going to be having a very good day. So, first things first, just keep it far away. Next thing we notice here is we see that Western Digital has opted to use the superior landing ramp design for this hard drive. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like we have a 5 or 6 platter design here, going by the landing ramp. Looks like a 5 platter design here. And so if we have 2 terabytes of usable capacity in this drive, if we have 2 terabytes of usable capacity in this drive, 2,000 gigabytes, and we have 5 platters, that's 400 gigabytes per platter, which means about 200 gigabytes per platter side. So comparatively speaking, these are fairly low density platters, only packing 200 gigs a side on each platter. And I'm assuming that they're using all 10 platter sides, which it looks like the drive is equipped. Drive is set up to run all 10 platter sides. So, and Western Digital has once again used, they've done a couple things differently here. They don't have the magnet itself keeping the head stack together, keeping the head stack from coming off the back of the landing ramp. They have a little rubber stopper right there that can be pulled out, and when that gets pulled out, all 10 heads will come off this landing ramp. So that's the next thing we're going to do. So this little rubber stopper right in there can be pulled up, just like that. And it's got a little dowel on the end here. A little dowel on the end there. And now that that is clear, now that that is out of the drive, the head stack has cleared the landing ramp. So we're not going to take the head stack out of the drive just yet. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the landing ramp out of the drive. So it just unscrews, and the landing ramp, looks like I don't have this, oh, there we go, and the landing ramp just comes right out. And there it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 platters. So, and now we should be clear to disassemble the probably pretty interesting platter stack. It looks like they have separators between each of the platters. So we'll have 4 or 5 separators, depending on whether or not they opted to install a separator between the bottom platter and the platter stack and the bottom casing of the drive. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of a spindle motor balancing mechanism, or well, some sort of provisions to balance the spindle motor's rotation, like we saw on the Seagate ST41650N hard drive teardown. We have the retention ring on the top platter stack, on the very top of the platter stack. This drive has the most platters, and therefore it's unsurprising that this drive has the most screws holding this retention ring down. And then we have our spindle motor here, and yes, it does look like we have some provision, some sort of mechanism here for balancing out the spindle motor, because there's a little insert installed in one of these holes. So with a platter stack as big and heavy as this one is, having a balanced spindle motor is critical. So go ahead and lift the first platter out. Now, I'm not expecting there to be any scratches or any kind of obvious mechanical defects, because I believe the failure mode that this drive suffered is a head preamplifier failure. So, only little mark there is a tiny groove left behind from the mark there is a tiny groove left behind from the retention ring. Now we have a separator bracket here, and it is made of some pretty nicely machined aluminum. So I'll pop this off, and we have a nice brushed finish to it. A lot more care and pride and quality taken in this than there was the separator from the Samsung drive. And we have a separator ring. Comes out just like so. And we have We have platter number 2 in the stack. Again, mirror finish. Just like that. And then we have another separator. Again, brushed aluminum finish. Another separator ring. Then another platter. This will be platter number 3 coming out. Mirror finish. We have another one of these separators here. And then we have another separator ring. Another platter. So this will be platter 4 of 5. And we have what looks like our last and final separator. There we go. Managed to get this one out without having to get too violent. Definitely an interesting brushed aluminum pattern there. And we have one last separator ring. And this platter, so here's our 5th and final platter. Again, mirrored finish on both sides, just like it should be. And then that just leaves us with a spindle motor that is permanently fixed into the drive and a head stack. So it looks like our head stack connector down here is already ready to come free, just like that. And then to get the head stack itself free, we need to turn the drive over and undo this torque screw right here. So that's just a matter of poking through the label and just turning this about 16,000 times. And it looks like there's an integrated Torx. It looks like there's an integrated Torx bit into the top half here that will need to be backed out in tandem. There we go, just like that. The head stack is out. Look at that. I have unfortunately mangled it a bit. But look at that. What a thing of beauty. 10 heads, 5 platters. We have our voice coil here at the back. Our Mylar here bears a 2011 copyright from WDC, the Western Digital Corporation, and this is when the drive was originally manufactured. We have a silk screening date of 43/14, 43rd week of 2014. So that's either when this drive was originally manufactured, or maybe they swapped the head stack into this drive, and that just happened to be when the head stack was manufactured. And speaking of our head stack, we have our head preamplifier IC right there, polished to a mirror finish. We have 10 sets of contacts for testing the head stack. And we have 10 sets of traces going out to each head stack. Well, going out to each head, we have a couple of wires there that go to our voice coil. Yeah, I do wonder what goes on inside of these head preamplifiers. Yeah. But yeah, that just leaves us with the lower magnet down here. That is held in by a single screw right down there. So it should just be a matter of go in there with the screwdriver, break that loose. The screw and the screwdriver immediately get attracted to the magnet. The screw very weakly so, but still enough to draw it over. And then there's no screw on the bottom or anything holding this in. And so I think it's just a matter of lifting the magnet up. However, there's a rubber bump stop right here that I think is keeping us in place. In which case, the magnet will not be coming out, unfortunately. So, and this is the annoying part, is reassembling one of these drives with large magnets, not only in terms of getting your screwdriver near the magnet and having it immediately get attracted to it, like Seagate drives attract bad sectors. There we go. But also just trying to thread the screw into place. So I think this one I might reassemble on camera. I might not. If I do reassemble it on camera, I will just fast forward through it. So even though the head stack is made of aluminum, it's still being, the magnet at the back is still being attracted quite strongly to the magnet. just like that. There we go. Three hard drives torn down on a Tuesday night. So, I think that just about covers it. So that's three bad drives torn down, and an interesting, I would say that this is definitely the most interesting of the three. Always been curious to know what's inside one of these 2 terabyte Western Digital hard drives. Now this one seems to be a 2014 built drive, going by the date code printed on the Mylar ribbon connection on the head stack. So if or when the 2 terabyte drives from 2016 running in Falcon 9 eventually fail, I will definitely be tearing those drives down and determining how they are also built. Likewise, I've got some very high capacity drives installed in Hyperion behind me. Some 4 terabyte drives and some 8 terabyte drives notably, that if or when they fail, I will also be tearing those down to see how they're constructed. Apparently, those 8 terabyte drives are filled with helium, and so it might be interesting to see if we can crack the cover on one of those and sniff a little bit of helium and make my voice rise 48 octaves or something like that. So anyways, I believe that just about does it for this video. So this is TCG Productions. Peace out, guys. Peace out. Thank you for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.